Hello there, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Quantum Dragon podcast. My name is Brian Siegelwax, and I'll be your host. With me today is my zeroth guest. He is the least qualified person in quantum. That's right, please welcome to the show Brian Siegelwax. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Mr. Siegelwax? Yes, that's correct, thank you. And please call me Brian. Very well then, Brian. You can call me Mr. Siegelwax. Now, I can't help noticing that I'm interviewing myself. Would you care to explain why this inaugural episode is quite so unorthodox? Sure, that's an easy one. I recently listened to an episode of the Superposition Guys podcast in which the host interviewed an AI. Soon afterward, I heard a Quantum Pirates podcast in which both parties were AI. Not to be outdone, the Superposition Guys podcast then had an episode in which the host was interviewed by a guest. So instead of the host interviewing the guest was doing the interviewing. So that got me thinking the one format I haven't heard is the host interviewing his or herself. That's probably a symptom of insanity, but I'm not qualified to diagnose myself. That makes no sense at all, but whatever. One of the things you're known for, Brian, is having evaluated over 100 quantum technology products. That's a really big number. Do you really expect people to believe that? I don't know if anyone believes it, but it's true. It started off as simple curiosity. I wanted to try everything. Then, a couple of years into this adventure, two things happened. One, I realized I couldn't remember everything I used. And two, I tried to create a new account somewhere and I discovered that I already had one. I had created the account so long ago that I forgot about it. So I decided to make a list, which was easy to do because I had blogged everything. Once I had an initial list, I decided to publish it on Medium with some annotations as to what's good, what's free, and so forth. And this had the effect of giving me a number. And I saw it like a video game score, and it made me want to seek out more products to play with. Also, keep in mind that some of these products work in ensembles. So I might use Blockade within qBraid to access Amazon Bracket, to access QuEra's Aquila neutral atom quantum computer. That's four right there. And because I've migrated away from Qiskit, I might take a small Qiskit circuit, use Percival to convert it to a photonic circuit, and then run it through Quandela Cloud to use Quandela's Altair photonic quantum computer. That's another four, so now I'm up to eight, and now 100 hopefully starts to sound a little more plausible. I'll buy that for $1. So, Brian, after years of doing this, you must have some favorites, right? That's what I used to think. And if you search for the outdated article on Medium, you'll see that I was indicating my favorite products at the time. Since then, I've realized that the products that I want to use are not necessarily the products I'm asked to use for certain projects, number one. And they might not necessarily be the best either. And the latter shows the value of trying many different products because I'll always think of my favorites first, but I might have to concede that something else out there might be better for a specific task. Well, in that case, Brian, are there any products, whether they're your favorites or not, that stand out in some positive way? Yeah, there have been a few. The undisputed champion is Alice and Bob's Boson 4 because it's the only product I've ever tapped out on. They've published that the average bit flip time is 7 minutes, but I didn't know that when I first used it. So I started out trying microseconds and that didn't work. Okay, so let me try milliseconds, and now I'm wondering, am I doing this right? Now I'm trying seconds and tens of seconds and wondering what the heck's going on here. I had to reach out to them and verify that everything was set up properly and that I wasn't accidentally using a simulator or something. And of course, I didn't try 7 minutes because there was a 15-minute cap at the time, and you can't just run one or two shots. You have to run hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of shots. So let's take 1 second as an example. If you want to run 1,000 shots, you have to wait more than 1,000 seconds to get the results, which is roughly 17 minutes, which is beyond the 15-minute cap. But more importantly, even without the cap, you'd probably wait 17 minutes to not see a bit flip error. So let's try 14 shots at 1 minute each. 14 is too low. So we have to keep running batches of 14. But it's still only 1 minute, so now we're spending hours and hours trying to spot an error, even though we're highly unlikely to see one. So I tapped out. I said to Allison, Bob, you win. I can't break your qubit, and I lack the patience to keep trying. And this is the only such instance of me tapping out like that. You've got something I can't break. The closest contender is Quantum Path by aQuantum. I had 2 long video calls and direct access and still felt like I hadn't seen all of its features. I didn't tap out like I did with Boson 4, but I realized there's way more to Quantum Path than meets the eye. And in third place, I'd have to say Mimic by QPerfect. They claimed they could simulate hundreds or thousands of qubits, and even knowing about tensor networks, I was skeptical of their numbers. But Mimic made easy work out of my entire library, a library which I use to determine the breaking points of various products. So I pushed the limits of free access to the Classiq engine and synthesized the largest QPE, HHL, etc. circuits to try and break Mimic, and Mimic wasn't impressed. So I decided to try the swap test, which you can design massive circuits with just a few lines of open chasm. I don't remember the exact circuit sizes I used, but I must have tried 101, 201, and 301 before skipping a few hundred at a time. And I eventually hit just over 1400. And I don't think that's a Mimic limitation. I think that was a user limitation during the trial period. Because of how it stopped so abruptly, simulators work like ludicrous speed in the movie Spaceballs. I don't know if you've seen that. You can't stop, you have to slow down first. Mimic didn't slow down, so I really don't think I found its breaking point. There are a bunch of numbers in that response, Brian. With all the talk about utility out there, have you found any particularly useful products? Well, useful can mean a lot of different things. I just realized no one can see my air quotes, whatever. But I'll give you one definition, which is when you give an introductory talk on quantum computing, and you always have to explain what we'll use them for. We're not going to use them to add 2 plus 2. We're going to use them for hard problems. So how can you determine whether or not to use a quantum computer? And for that matter, how would you know which algorithm to run, which backend to use, and so forth? There's a platform called QCentroid, which is interesting because you would select your use case, and then you would choose from multiple solvers, classical and quantum. You can run them all at the same time, and then you get back this plot that compares them all on runtime, cost, accuracy, and whatever else it's set up for. And of course, we need more qubits and fault tolerance, but the point is that it helps answer the question which solver might be useful, again with the air quotes, for your specific use case. If the problem is classically hard and the problem is large enough to observe a slowdown, then as the hardware companies deliver on their roadmaps over the next few years, you'll see if and when quantum solvers become advantageous. And that makes QCentroid useful. Also, going back to my product score from earlier, QCentroid powers another product called QF Studio, which is a collaboration with Moody's and Multiverse. So it's like a two for one addition to my list, and just like that, we're up to 10. Moving on from products, Brian, you're also known for writing, including for writing about some fairly technical concepts. How does an ice cream chef with a political science degree, and no offense, but how does an ice cream chef with a political science degree write about things like Bose-Einstein condensates? Well, there's a three-step process. I've got some initial information, often through a video call, that's step one. Then I write up a draft, that's step two. And then there's a review process, step three. Sometimes I get it right on the first try. Sometimes there are some minor changes, but I asked questions during the call, so I've never had a draft outright trashed. Um, I'm also accustomed at this point to there being disagreement within an organization as to how something should be characterized. So I don't take it personally if I'm off a little bit because I sometimes observe a back and forth debate. One time in particular, there were some suggested edits. I submitted the draft for re review, and someone else in the same organization suggested edits to the edits that I had just made. So it wasn't even my characterization anymore, it was an approved, edited characterization that needed to be edited again. But eventually, articles get to a point where everyone gives a thumbs up and it goes out the door. It's got my name on it, but I didn't write it in a vacuum. So, in the case of Bose-Einstein condensates, those went through Infleqtion, and the appropriate people had a chance to look at it and suggest changes before publication, especially if it's for IQT, inside quantum technology. I might take some liberties on Medium or in the Quantum Dragon, but for IQT, there has to be a quality assurance step. That's imposed by me, by the way. I want IQT to know that the information and conclusions have been vetted, so we don't need to do retractions or anything. You've also written a few books, Brian. Can you tell us what the future holds in that domain? Sure. I think all of my social media accounts link to PayHip, where my books can be downloaded for free. I think I've got one last idea in me. After Quantum Ice Cream, I thought I really can't get more unorthodox than that. It's not even a book really. It's a Jupyter notebook. It's book-ish, but instead of being a book with some static code in it, it's a book that you can run the code in it and modify the code in it. But I eventually came up with one idea that'll be weird even by my standards. I've got some other ideas that have come from various places, but I'm now at a point where there has to be some creative leap. So I'm looking at these ideas and I'm not seeing that leap, or at least the inspiration hasn't hit me yet with those. So who knows what the future holds with those other ideas, but never say never, I guess. But I do have one more idea in me that definitely pushes my literary bar forward, and my book tank might be out of gas after that. But again, I thought that way after Quantum Ice Cream. Well, Brian, I think I've spent way too much time talking to myself. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share? No, I agree with you, Mr. Siegelwax. This podcast has probably gone on way too long. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to listen to myself talk to myself for however long this has been. In that case, I'd like to thank everyone for listening to this inaugural episode of the Quantum Dragon podcast. The good news is they can only get better from here.